Hello again, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this Thursday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting today's show. First up here, this is a view, Anchorage webcam, looking east, and this is on a clear day, the clear day shot, not from today, but for a reference. And this morning, this is what it looked like with the smoke from the Swan Lake fire rolling back into the area there. It made quite a difference in the visibility, as you can see, especially here across East Anchorage. And again, from something like that, the mountains obscured, and quite an area of fog came into the area there. It looks like, especially on the east side and south side. And another shot of that, this is looking south here from Anchorage, and of course, turning an arm down this way. And we're looking at that same shot, definitely reduced visibilities for sure here with that area of smoke, especially looking south or toward where the fire is. And a couple interesting objects right there aloft, and I won't elaborate on that any further. And for fire danger, looking like this, still an extreme, a rather large area of extreme fire danger from the Koyukuk Valley expands over the Yukon Flats, where it's been just all summer now, and since last spring's been the highest fire danger up in that area. And high fire danger here, Kenai Peninsula, Northern Cook Inlet, Anchorage, Palmer, Matanuska Valley, Susitna Valley, on up towards Cantwell, and then eastward there into the Copper River Basin. So some extreme fire danger there in the valley area. Extreme also in areas of the Susitna Valley, really dry over in the Copper River Basin area. Actually across all of southern Alaska is quite dry. And that area of extreme fire danger, not expected to change too much. Now the areas of high fire danger out here, Selawik Valley and north into the Western Brooks Range, even the North Slope, that should improve here over the next couple of days as moisture, cooler temperatures and clouds, and a little precipitation pushes in from the west and a little bit from the northwest there, with a pretty good jet just along and off the Arctic coast. Otherwise, not too bad there through the Tanana Valley, where Fairbanks picked up about 3/100 of an inch of rainfall during the day today. Pretty light amounts, but enough to keep it suppressed a little bit there, especially compared to what it could be otherwise. And moving on to the satellite imagery, got like a series of systems continue to move eastward here, series of weak systems, bringing some light amounts of precipitation to the Arctic coast, locally the western North Slope areas. Some of that could spill down into the Bering Strait, just some clouds into St. Lawrence Island today. And at the Will Rogers Memorial Airport there on the central Arctic coast, they picked about 1/1200 of an inch of precipitation with that feature. So light rain, that's considered a wetting rain, but nothing too terribly heavy. And winds kick up a little bit with each passing system. There's some more out here over the Russian Far East that'll be coming through. Otherwise, sunshine here over the upper Yukon Valley and areas of the eastern interior right on down into the Kenai Peninsula. Temperatures this afternoon, 75 to 80 here from Kenai Peninsula up in the Matanuska Susitna Valley. Some areas warmer. And that same pattern up into the upper Yukon Valley. Had some showers lingering over the southeast coast into the afternoon today. Hoonah picked up 3/4 of an inch in the 12-hour period ending at 3 p.m. this afternoon. About 1/3 of an inch fell over at Juneau, and anywhere from 1 to 2/10 or less fell over the southern southeast coast. And anything along the North Gulf Coast is pretty negligible and light. Otherwise, clearing out Kodiak Island, with temperatures rising to the mid-70s, even at the state airport this afternoon. Otherwise, a lot of clouds here over the western interior areas into the Bering Sea, still very cloudy, really weak band that's just mainly isolated showers at best. Thunderstorms starting to develop mostly east of the border here, and a little bit into the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, and that should expand, get back to there, something like this today, and that could expand here a little bit farther to the west and south, maybe into the Talkeetnas, Copper River Basin. Could see chance of a thunderstorm. I don't think it'll get too far much more to the west there, because we're starting to get some stabilizing effect here with the advance of this system coming across, as weak as it is, from the Russian Far East there. And areas of light precipitation here with that across the Seward Peninsula. And again, the rain is moving into the central Arctic coast there and continuing back along the western areas. Weak trough, light precipitation, cloudy skies here for the Alaska Peninsula. Pribilof, same thing going on. Some of that moisture from this warm front actually sliding westward with it. But again, light amounts. And Shimya, light drizzle, rain, and fog today with IFR conditions. There's that trough brought the moisture into the panhandle today, starting to taper off, especially up here to the north. And for tonight, that will probably end shower-wise, maybe over the southern panhandle. Still a risk of some showers actually across the entire area there, just a chance of some isolated or widely scattered showers at best. And that kind of extends up to Yakutat, then cuts off just mostly cloudy for Prince William Sound, North Gulf Coast. There'll be a few breaks, especially over the Copper River Basin. Areas of smoke again from the fires. Same thing up in the interior, although western interior shaping up pretty good as far as smoke goes, with the increasing westerly flow going to carry it all to the east. Otherwise, we have this weak front here. It's not as impressive as it looks on the graph here. I probably should have just troughed it in, but there'll be some areas of light precipitation associated with that along the boundary there, maybe even with the warm front here down into the mostly the Yukon Delta, showers over the southwest mountains, and continued drizzle, fog, from the Pribilofs down to the Alaska Peninsula. Drying out a little bit here, but still a band of some moisture hanging back on the north side of the eastern Alaska Range and North Slope, and isolated showers on the west side. And taking a look at tomorrow, we'll see it should be another, hopefully, mostly fair day here for Kodiak. Going to be kind of right on the edge there along the east side of the island to some clouds with this system here. But anywhere over the island, Shelikof Strait, up into Kamishak Bay, Iliamna, and those areas, Port Ellsworth, should be a mostly sunny day with some weak ridging here over the southwest interior. That tends to make for a downslope flow off the western Alaska Range. Afternoon thunderstorms again developing, kind of suppressed eastward and southward now with this series of systems cutting across the northern interior or along the Brooks Range there. Again, that front kind of oscillating north and south over the next couple of days with each passing wave that rolls on by. So it's kind of a little farther to the south. Tomorrow it's a little farther to the north. And otherwise, still isolated showers, mostly cloudy skies for the Panhandle. Areas of smoke again, really weak low just east of Kodiak. I don't think that'll affect, maybe some clouds there, as I mentioned. A strong high here over the Aleutians, but it'll be mostly cloudy under that with a stable air and light winds. So fog and low clouds with that, but again, winds will be light. And then a couple of really weak disturbances passing eastward there on the northern perimeter of this high. And they really don't do much by the time they reach the west coast here at all. It's still a couple back there to the west, but they're very weak, and it stays locked in over the much of the Aleutians. Light winds for the day on Saturday, and still that overwater trajectory carrying a lot of moisture here hits the any upslope terrain at all, and will ring out in the form of fog, drizzle, or light rain, maybe showers. Partial clearing, partly to mostly sunny here, I'd say, for south central Alaska. Look for a tendency to increase the clouds, though, kind of get into a stable pattern with not much wind. And it's kind of hard to say. Throw the smoke mix in there, and it'll be fair and dry, but it won't be hot and it won't be wet. Anyway, isolated thunderstorms becoming more isolated, less of a factor on Saturday here, kind of restricted from the western Copper River Basin, maybe the Talkeetnas on up toward North Wayantok, Nabezna. Otherwise, this front comes southward again with this system. Kind of a gradient there on the back side of that over the eastern Arctic coast, North Slope. So you could see some winds kick up briefly there with that as it passes on by, as a little bit more of a ridge builds in behind that, and the next one that's way back there over the Russian Far East yet. But along the frontal boundary, definitely cloudy, possible areas of light rain, and showers back up to the west or the central Brooks Range, and otherwise dry, as I mentioned here, Copper River Basin, southern Alaska. Not too bad, really, for the first day of the weekend. As for lows tonight, 55 to 60, upper Yukon Valley, and mid to upper 50s in the Tanana Valley, with lower 50s here toward the southwest coast, Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, up to across the Seward Peninsula, mid 50s, 56 at Kotzebue. 40s north slope in the Arctic coast with lower to mid 50s for the Panhandle and upper 40s out over the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. That'll be followed by highs tomorrow, anywhere from 75 to 80, call it here, upper Yukon Valley, down toward Northway and Tok. Lower to mid 70s in the greater Fairbanks area, possibly lower 70s out toward Tanana, and 73 to 77 for the Susitna Valley. That'll extend down in the Kenai Peninsula as well, lower to mid 70s Copper River Basin, and 60s there across much of the southeast coast. Haines, Skagway could top the 70-degree mark possibly tomorrow afternoon. Out in the west, not a lot of change, kind of the usual 50s that you get this time of year, lower to mid 50s, some upper 40s out towards Shimia, and mid to upper 40s western Arctic coast there, kind of some cooler air, especially the freezing levels dropping up there, but a little milder here on the east side, and 65 to 70 for the Kobuk and Koyukuk valleys, followed by lows, again, lower to mid 50s here over the upper Yukon Valley, and 50s extend all the way back to the southwest coast, and then you're into the upper 40s for the Pribilofs and the Aleutians. As for the Panhandle, lows again 50 to 55, maybe a little warmer to the north, and somewhere in the 50s here for south central Alaska. Copper River Basin, upper 40s to lower 50s depending on your elevation, and mid 50s I guess for the eastern interior. Followed by highs on Saturday. Lower 70s, upper Yukon Valley, 70-75 right down into the Fairbanks area, 70-75 for the Copper River Basin, 65 to 72, Kenai Peninsula, Mananuska, Susitna Valley areas, mid-60s Kodiak, mid-60s Bristol Bay, and cooler air back here to the west, so 50s, mid-50s Seward Peninsula, and even into the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
First flying weather graphic for Friday morning. IFR here from St. Lawrence Island down along the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta coast, right on across western Bristol Bay to the Alaska Peninsula. A couple more areas IFR over the Aleutians. Marginal VFR all the way to the possibly the western slopes of the western Alaska range, and some of that could slip on up toward Denali. Smoke mixed in there as well with marginal VFR, western interior, north slope, and some IFR pretty close to the central eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. And IFR here up into the north coast of the Panhandle, and then eastward, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay, down along the border. In the afternoon, that vanishes, but left with a lot of marginal conditions here for the Panhandle. Areas of IFR out over the Gulf of Alaska staying hopefully off the coast in the afternoon. Marginal VFR possibly up to Mentasta Pass due to convection building, and also marginal VFR Prince William Sound. Otherwise VFR Kodiak Island through Cook Inlet, Susitna Valley on up into the interior to the north slope, and even the eastern Arctic coast breaking out. IFR persists there over the northern Bering Sea, but marginal along the southwest coast, exception being the Yukon Delta coast, and mostly marginal, it looks like, for the Aleutians. And for Saturday, not a lot of change out here. The IFR just kind of shifts around a little bit, but pushes in across the Yukon Delta, all the way east Norton Sound to the Nulato Hills, south side of the Seward Peninsula, up over the northwest, or the western Brooks Range area, the Long Mountains, western and central Arctic coast over to possibly, the Prudhoe Bay area, marginal, then VFR east of there, VFR south, then we've got marginal here south of the Alaska Range, IFR increasing, North Gulf Coast, Kenai Peninsula, Northern Panhandle once again, and for the afternoon on Saturday, looking like this, VFR starting to get the squeeze put on it here, but still from Bristol Bay through Cook Inlet, right up the Susitna Valley. Now the eastern interior areas, marginal VFR and the increase of those disturbances coming in up here over the northwest, and IFR St. Lawrence Island, and marginal VFR Northern Panhandle and the western part with VFR over toward the border. And for Anaktuvuk, starting out IFR possibly tomorrow, could only be marginal, but the point here is an improving trend throughout the day. It will become VFR in the afternoon. Same trend for Adigan, low conditions early, best conditions by noontime and thereafter. Lake Clark and Merrill, VFR. And for Rainy, same forecast, good VFR conditions there. There'll be clouds and maybe a risk of a thunderstorm, but it'll stay VFR also for windy. And Isabel, same forecast, VFR. Mentasta, Now, VFR could possibly become marginal depending on how low those ceilings get with the building convection. May stay VFR, but definitely look for a downward trend in the ceilings visibilities tomorrow afternoon. Tonito, though, VFR. Portage, VFR. Chilcoot and White's marginal VFR and becoming VFR. Freezing levels, haven't seen 2,000 feet here for a while, but there it is right along the western Arctic coast of that Arctic jet there pushing it southward. Otherwise, quite a gradient up here, and then pretty slack again, 10,000 feet, Bering Sea, and much of the central or the southern 3/4 of the state into the Panhandle, 12,000 feet there west of the Queen Charlottes, and then western Aleutians, 12,000 feet. As far as icing goes, with that moisture coming eastward here, could be some moderate rime icing, considerable moderate, possibly here showing up around the Cape Lisburne, Point Hope areas. Otherwise, this whole area will be slipping eastward and probably dissipating late tomorrow evening and into Saturday. Otherwise, just areas of possible icing here with the convection that builds over the eastern interior. And for the jet stream, there's that westerly jet, about 60 to 80 knots there, coming out of the Russian Far East along the northern Arctic coast. This area here diving southward, and we're left in kind of a cold region. So at 9,000 feet, west-southwest, actually ahead of this trough axis, 25 to as high as 30 knots with that. Otherwise, 5 to 20 knots here for the southern Alaska. And for Friday's 9,000 foot wind flow, we're looking at westerlies 25 to 35 Arctic coast, maybe 20 to 25 across the Alaska Peninsula, 5 to 15 though for the Panhandle, and really light winds out here over the Aleutians with that high just south of Adak and Atka, just 5 to 15 knots there. And otherwise, southern Alaska, 5 to 15 as well. Taking a look at turbulence, looks like some light to isolated moderate chop here along the lee side of the Alaska Peninsula. Moderate chop up there along the western capes.
Finding the Milky Way.
Hey there, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regas, astronomer for the Cincinnati Observatory. This week we'll be your guides to the galaxy.
Yep, we're going to show you the Milky Way, something I hardly ever get to see in Florida. How many times have you seen the Milky Way, Dehne?
The only Milky Way I see in Cincinnati is filled with chocolate and nougat. For me, light pollution is a big problem. City lights illuminating signs, parking lots, buildings.
And also the night sky. The more light that we shine up, the less light the stars shine down.
Even though it's invisible from cities, James and I can share a sneaky tip to find the Milky Way in your sky. Let's show you.
Okay, let's pretend it's 11 o'clock at night and we're far from city lights.
Wow, in the countryside it is so dark.
I know, and look at all the stars you can see.
So many stars that you can't even count them all.
We're facing south and you can see a faint band of light, and it will span nearly 180 degrees of the sky. This is the Milky Way. When you look at the Milky Way, you're observing billions and billions of stars. This is the galaxy we live in, and its stars are all around us.
There are so many stars in our line of sight that they appear as milky clouds. Most ancient cultures were just as fascinated with the Milky Way as they were with any planet or constellation. You can definitely see why. Out in the country, it dominates the sky. As we see the wide-angle view, some bright and famous constellations can be found along the Milky Way, such as Cassiopeia the Queen, Cygnus the Swan, and Sagittarius the Archer.
Cassiopeia is one of the most recognizable constellations, and on summer evenings, she sits on her throne in the northeastern sky.
What, you mean those stars that look like the letter W, that's a queen?
Use your imagination, Dehne.
Well, that picture certainly helps, but that's hard to imagine.
In that case, picture this W shape of stars as Cassiopeia's crown, sparkling with 5 stellar jewels.
Okay, now that I can see. Now, kick back and look high in the eastern sky. You'll see 3 very bright stars marking the Summer Triangle. The Summer Triangle includes 3 constellations: Lyra the Harp, Cygnus the Swan, and Aquila the Eagle.
Let's focus on Cygnus, since it's probably the easiest to identify because of its cross-like shape. In fact, it's also called the Northern Cross.
Cygnus's brightest star is Dehne, which marks the tail of the swan. Cygnus is located in an extremely rich part of the Milky Way. So imagine it flying along the great river in the sky.
Near Dehne, the Milky Way branches into two channels, leaving a dark region in the middle called the Cygnus Rift. Now face south. Here, the Milky Way threads between two zodiacal constellations, Scorpius and Sagittarius. Scorpius the Scorpion is easy to spot with its bright red star and its curved tail stars. The stars in Sagittarius resemble more of a teapot than a centaur wielding a bow and arrow.
But when you look between Scorpius and Sagittarius, you're peering into the center of our galaxy. In that direction, there are billions and billions of stars, and at the very center lies a supermassive black hole. It's not nearly as big as the one imaged in April, which is such a cool picture of a black hole.
And don't worry about our black hole. It's tens of thousands of light years away, so you won't get swallowed up.
Of course, you can't see the Milky Way if you're a city-bound stargazer. Let's show you the difference between a rural sky and a light-polluted sky.
Ugh, yikes, what a difference. Even though the Milky Way disappeared, we still have three constellations clearly visible to guide us: Cassiopeia, Cygnus, and Sagittarius.
And that's where the Milky Way is, even if you can't see it. Once you identify Cassiopeia, Cygnus, or Sagittarius, scan these regions of the sky with binoculars. With just a little magnification, a wealth of stars will be revealed to you.
So, follow the Milky Way tonight.
And start counting those billions and billions of stars as you keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the Stargazer segment. Sea ice conditions for today are the sea ice chart. Here, still mostly open. Not a lot of changes again going on with the heavy ice along and north of the Barrier Islands. And not much change out here to the west either, and none really expected over the next 5 days. Coastal water forecast south to southeast at 15 knots here for the south coast. Seas 6 feet. And 5 to 6 foot seas with south to southeast winds on the north coast at 10 knots. South 15, Lynn Canal and Clarence Strait and Stevens Passage both at 10 knots from the south with seas down to 2 feet or less. And for Saturday, for Stevens Passage, not much change. South to southeast winds on the light side, just 10 knots, seas slight, and south 15 for Lynn Canal. Southeast at 10 on the south coast, seas down to 4 to 5 feet now, and east-southeast 10 to 15 on the north coast with 4 foot seas. And for Cook Inlet, southwest winds 20 knots south of the Forelands, south 15 here for northern Cook Inlet. Small craft advisories for Kamishak Bay. For those west winds at 25 and seas at 8 feet. And north at 15 there for the Barrens, northeast 15 for the western North Gulf Coast, southeast 15 on the east side. Prince William Sound variable to northeast, light 10 knots with seas no more than 2 feet. That turns more easterly on Saturday, but stays pretty light, and those seas down low too at 2 feet. And easterlies at 15 knots there in the zone around Middleton Island. 10 knot winds for the western North Gulf Coast out of the east. Also for the Barren Islands. Also for Kamishak Bay, really coming down, swinging around direction there, and the seas dropping off too from 8 feet tomorrow to 2 feet Saturday, south to southwest at 10 for Cook Inlet with 2 to 3 foot seas. Kodiak Island, west-northwest, 15 to 20 tomorrow. Much stronger winds though. You can see small craft advisories here on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula from Sitkinak to Cape Saratchev. Northeast 25, gusts up to 40 knots, so gale force gusts there. West 25, Bristol Bay, 6 foot seas, and northwest 20 on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. And taking a look at Saturday, lighter winds here for Kodiak a little bit, just west to north, 15 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas. And lighter winds also Sitkinak to Castle Cape. Still holding on to the sustained 25 knot small craft advisories, but losing the gale force gusts. Seas coming down to 6 feet. And northwest at about 20 here from Castle Cape to Cape Saratchev. And west 15 for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, Bristol Bay, west 20, seas 5 feet. Western Aleutian, southwest 15 to 20 knots with 4 to 5 foot seas. Pretty light for Adak and Atka. Southwest at 10, 3 to 4 foot seas, and we got small craft advisory south of Unalaska Island. For northwesterlies at 25 and seas at 6 feet, otherwise west 15 to 20 elsewhere. And then for Saturday, northwest 20, south side of Unalaska Island with 10 to 15 knot winds for the remainder of the eastern Aleutians, and south to southeast of 15, excuse me, for Adak and Atka, and then southwest 20 from Kiska to Shemya. And for the southwest coast, westerlies 20 knots, sustained, pretty uniform there with 6 foot sea. Same thing for the Pribilofs. Southwest 20, 7 foot sea, St. Matthew Island. Southwesterlies 20 knots, St. Lawrence Island. Drop it down to 10 knots, same direction for Norton Sound. And then 20 knot winds into Norton Sound, and 20 knot winds for St. Lawrence Island as well as St. Matthew Island and areas north of Nunivak Island there for the Yukon Delta coast. All 20 knots, seas 5 to 6 feet or 5 to 7 feet. West at 15 here, south of Nunivak Island, west 20 for the Pribilofs. Beaufort Sea, tomorrow, small craft advisories here. 25 knots on the central coast, sustained 30 knots on the east side. Southwest 20 on the west coast, and 15 knots coming around from Cape Beaufort, and 20 knots from the south from Cape Thompson to Wales. Those turn north at 20 knots there from Wales up to Cape Thompson, then Cape Thompson right up the west side, northwest 15, northwest 20 for the central coast, and then southeast 20 knots for the entire eastern stretch of the Beaufort Sea coast for Saturday. And for tonight, we got this weak frontal boundary dropping into the central interior, and there'll be cloudy skies, higher humidities, and maybe some moisture, light amounts of precipitation with it. Nothing more than 1 to 2 tenths tops. Some areas won't see anything at all. Dry here over southern Alaska, staying hopefully mostly clear for Kodiak Island. Isolated low clouds, fog, and drizzle, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, southeast Bering. And jumping ahead to Saturday, not too bad over southern Alaska or up over the northwest. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again tomorrow.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.